to welcome everyone to the 850th Transport and Infrastructure Committee meeting. I'd like to welcome all committee members, Councillor Curtis, we have visiting Councillor Fowler and Councillor Doran, so thanks for coming along. We will get underway. We'll start off with attendance apology, so everyone's here, so noted, no leave of absence. Confirmation of minutes. Do we have any mover for confirmation of minutes? Councillor Gates, seconded Councillor O'Neill. Is there any changes that anyone wants to know? Put the motion to you. All in favour? Carry. Any conflicts of interest declarations? Neil? Thank you. We have currently 3 start items, 5.1, 6.1 and 6.3. Does anyone want to unstar any of those? Councillor Young.
Thanks, Chairman. Sorry, I was just out of the room. Could we unstar 6.1 just for a brief presentation for the benefit of the family of the people concerned?
Presentation.
Thanks, Chairman.
Not a problem. Any others? So we'll take 6.1. Sorry, let's go 5.1 and 6.3. Do I have a mover for the 2 start items? Councillor Marshall, Councillor Hamill. All in favour? Motion carry. Thank you. So we'll head to 6.1. Petition response naming the boat ramp in Arthur Earle Park. Did you want a quick presentation on that? Is there a presentation or someone like to? No presentation. Is there anything you'd like to ask?
Oh, well, I just wanted to draw attention to the topic here, rather than this be just flowing through, because I know the family is probably watching. I'm thankful to Paul for his work, Paul Hoffman, in preparing this report. There was a petition presented to recognise a family who lived in the Nerang Valley, shall we say, the McCavanaghs, and their descendants are still living in the area, and there was a petition raised with a lot of signatures from all through the valley, and the objective was to have a particular boat ramp in Nerang named after them. It's not been possible because of the naming conventions applied by the Waterways Authority, who are in fact the owners of that, but the officers have determined that McCavanaghs are indeed a family that should be recognised, and there's some content in the report about that, and the recommendation is that at a future point in time, if an appropriate facility or feature is able to be identified, then it would go through the naming process and would have the support of council. So I just wanted to raise that in case the family are watching, and thank them for their service to the community. Thanks, Chairman.
And would you like
I'll
to
move the recommendation?
Second it. Is there any other questions? Anyone like to talk to it? Anyone against? Yep. Councillor Tozer. Oh, you're already ready for the vote.
You said anyone for, anyone against, I put my hand up and you said for.
No problems. Put the motion to you. All in favour? Carry. Thank you. We'll go down now to 6.2, petition response, make Currumbin Valley rock pool a safe place. Do we have a little presentation on that? We have Paul. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, councillors. My name is Paul Hoffman, and I'm with the Open Space Assets team. I'm here to provide the committee with an update and an overview of the investigations which have occurred in response to a petition council received in May of this year regarding the Currumbin Valley rock pool. Council received a petition from the community requesting the city prioritise the wellbeing of visitors, and post a number of incidents over the years requested immediate action to make the Currumbin rock pools a safe place. The petition highlighted a number of incidents which have occurred at the rock pools over the years. The rock pools are a very popular location for visitors and residents alike, gaining popularity through social media, with people seeking out natural locations to enjoy. However, some visitors do undertake risky behaviour, like jumping from rocks into the rock pool, which is a common occurrence. With the city's number one priority being safety and noting a number of legislative requirements, officers undertook a site investigation and risk review which identified a number of areas for further investigation. This included a signage review, geotechnical assessment of the surrounding rock face, underwater assessment, which actually disproved the urban myth about the submerged tractor in the bottom of the rock pool, a review of visitor experience and the park assets. Signage. A review of the signage, existing signage, identified the need to upgrade the signage on site and to highlight the potential hazards identified in the risk review. The updated signage identifies now 9 hazards to warn swimmers and visitors in this natural area. The rock escarpment assessment. The city's Environment, Heritage and Resilience team engaged geotechnical engineers to conduct a risk assessment of the rock formations, which you can see in this image, councillors, are prone to natural erosion accelerated by people climbing and diving from the rock face. Based on engineering advice, the city has conducted rock scaling to remove loose rock and reduce the risk to visitors. The underwater survey. To better understand what's under the water, the city utilised technology to scan the rock pool to identify the natural topography of the rock basin and identify any debris which may have been present. The city then engaged specialist underwater contractors to remove the build-up of underwater debris which was present. A total of 12 tonnes was removed from the bottom of the rock pool. Finally, park improvements due to the increased popularity of the rock pools and the adjacent park, the city will develop a park improvement and renewal plan to reduce the risk identified and further enhance visitor experience. So in summary, we are recommending the city undertake an annual rockfall inspection, install permanent updated signage, develop a park improvement and renewal plan, and conduct an underwater assessment of the rock pools annually and or after significant rainfall events to remove any hazards. Any questions?
Thank you. Councillor moved, Councillor O'Neill, second Councillor Tozer. Anyone want to talk?
Yep. Thanks, Chair. And can I say it's been a great report, guys, and certainly I was very grateful that you went to the lengths that you did to find out what's underneath and what we should do going forward. I had a visit by QPS, Queensland Police Service, about the Currumbin rock pools just after you started to do your investigation, and they were able to give us some really valuable information that they had got from the Queensland Ambulance Service as well. Not only about, we all knew about the tragedies, but there's been lots of injuries as well. So I think it was way overdue for investigation and some, and I really appreciate the recommendations coming through here. I did have a lot of comment from locals saying that we want to keep it a natural area, that we still want to be able to use it, and I think that we all feel the same way. We'll get a bit of pushback on signage, I know that, because nobody likes signage, and I hate signage myself, but I think that the onus is on us to make sure that people are aware of the risks that they are taking. And I'm sure just from clearing all that debris, 12 tonnes of debris, that will certainly lessen the risk of if people do choose to take that risk and jump off the ledge. So thank you very much, and I wholeheartedly support this. Thank you.
Anyone want to talk against the motion? Yes, just make comment that obviously we've got some beautiful natural assets in this city. Some of them can be dangerous. The work that the officer's done to follow up concerns, which we've had quite a few deaths and injuries. It's important that we do understand the areas where people do visit and we make sure that they are a safe spot. And I think this report allows us to continue for the public to enjoy these areas, but at the same time, hopefully mitigate some other injuries in the future. So thank you. We'll take the vote. All in favour? Carry. Thank you. 6.4, bike share scheme, contract performance and KPIs. We've got Dan, I think, coming for a presentation. Michael? Yep. Thank you.
Through the Chair, good afternoon, councillors. I'm here today to provide you with a briefing on the city's bike share scheme, provide a briefing on the performance of the scheme, and then we're also going to give you some information about the current contract as well, and future plans to enter into a new contract. So firstly, by way of background relating to our scheme. So firstly, the scheme commenced with our current contractor Lime in December 2020. The purpose of the scheme is to provide a sustainable alternative transport option to private vehicles. So reducing reliance on private vehicles was a key component of why we entered into a bike share scheme, to reduce reliance on private vehicles whilst also reducing congestion, particularly for short trips that are occurring around the city. So our current bike share scheme is a dockless, pedal-assisted electric e-bike scheme with approximately 1,300 bikes in the fleet. It's managed via a geofenced service area, and within the service area we have a number of different zones that help us manage the scheme. So firstly, in relation to parking, we have a number of different parking zones. So we have a mandatory parking zone, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail later, and we have no parking zones, and then we have what's called virtual parking pins. So they're locations where a rider is required to park their bike via the app, the Lime app. And then we also have what's called operating zones as well. So there's two particular types of operating zones that exist within the scheme. So one's a no-go zone, so that's an area where bikes aren't allowed to enter. And then we have go-slow zones as well. So they're areas within the city. So they're typically our highly pedestrianised areas. So around, say, Currumbin Surf Club, we have a go-slow zone. So what happens there is, as a bike enters the go-slow zone, the electric assist function shuts down once they reach a certain speed, which encourages slower movements through those busy areas in the city. In terms of patronage, so the city's bike share scheme continues to be very successful, very popular. To date, we've had more than 2.5 million trips on a Lime bike since December 2020. We've had more than 700,000 different individual users take a trip on a Lime bike on the Gold Coast. And so for this calendar year, we've had approximately 82,000 trips a month occur on a Lime bike. So really great numbers. And then in terms of, I guess, the broader transport conversation, when we talk about Lime bikes, again, this is a sustainable transport outcome and initiative. It's to our knowledge, one of the most successful active transport initiatives currently underway in the city. And one of the big learnings that we've had recently with our bike share scheme is its use during events in the city as well. So this year for the Gold Coast Marathon, on the Sunday of the event, we had 5,700 trips on a Lime bike, which is a record day for the use of Lime bikes. For the Pacific Air Show on the Sunday, we had 5,100 trips on a Lime bike. And then for a recent music festival, we had 4,900 trips on a Lime bike. So again, the use of this sustainable transport outcome is reducing reliance on private vehicles, it's reducing congestion around our major events and reducing car parking demand in those locations as well. So the benefits of the scheme really can't be underestimated. In terms of the contractor's performance against the KPIs currently in place, so the Lime are currently meeting 14 of their 15 contractual KPIs. The one KPI that they're not currently meeting relates to the servicing of bikes. So what we found is that the bikes, they're a new bike that's recently been rolled out and they didn't need to be serviced as often as what's in the contract. So we worked with Lime to support that arrangement. So they're being serviced on average once a month versus every 2 weeks, which is something the city was happy to support. Just in terms of some of the other important KPIs to mention, so in terms of complaints, so Lime are responding to complaints on average within 10 hours. In terms of the parking of bikes, so if a bike is reported as being parked inappropriately or unsafely, they're responding to that within an average of 8 hours. And then in terms of instances of vandalisation, we're seeing less than 2% of bikes being vandalised. So the scheme, we're continuing to improve the scheme. It's continuing to evolve. We're always learning about, ways to make it better, and we're working very closely with Lime, who are always open to improvements. So We've got a number of new initiatives that have either rolled out recently or we're rolling out soon for the scheme. So I'll run through a couple of those initiatives now. First and foremost, what can't be underestimated is we've reduced the size of the fleet significantly. So at the start of the year, we had 2,000 bikes in operation, and we've reduced that down significantly to 1,300 bikes. So that's a significant change and a significant improvement. We're basically seeing less bikes in our public spaces, and it means Lime have more time to better manage overall the scheme. So, and they can't afford to have bikes sitting idle in places where demand might not be as high. So they've got more time to put bikes in the right places, and we've certainly seen a change for the positive as a result of that new initiative. Another big one, we've recently signed up to a third-party program that gives us direct live access to Lime data. So that's been a really positive change for us as well. We can basically access information on the spot. We don't need to go through our contractor to receive information, and that helps us better monitor and have better oversight of the scheme. And we can look at data a lot easier than previously. Another big change is we've rolled out a mandatory parking zone across the whole service area. So this is a new initiative that's in place in a number of other locations around the world. So London and Paris have this initiative, and essentially what it means is prior to this being introduced, you could take a bike and ride it out to the western areas in the city, and you could leave it wherever you wanted to. Now there's a mandatory parking zone across the whole service area, which basically means there's set parking pins in different areas through the city, and you can't end your trip unless it's at a virtual parking pin. So we expect to see some big improvements as well, where a person has to basically leave a bike at a parking pin, which is a designated parking location that the city and Lime have worked together to find. Another trial coming up is early next year we'll be rolling out designated parking areas for Lime bikes. So we're rolling out 10 locations in Surfers, Paradise and Broadbeach, which will essentially be painted parking bays where Lime bikes will be deployed, and then they'll be returned to those locations by a user as well who's wanting to end a trip in that area. So if that trial goes well, which we expect it to, it's worked well in many other cities nationally and internationally. If it goes well, we'll look to roll out more of those, which have proven to be very popular and worked well in the past in other areas. So end-of-trip photo auditing is a new initiative as well that's just recently been rolled out, and is another big improvement. So essentially what this means is every time a person goes to end a trip on a Lime bike now, they have to take a photo, and there's some AI technology within the app that scans the photo that's been taken to identify if the bike has been parked appropriately. If it has been parked appropriately, that person is allowed to end their trip. If it hasn't been parked appropriately, they're then not able to end their trip. They continue paying for it until they park the bike in a safe, appropriate manner, and then they have to take another photo, and it's scanned again, and if all goes well, they're able to end their trip. So that's working really well so far. It has just recently started in the last couple of weeks, and we're seeing some really good data behind that as well. So the final one I'll mention quickly too relates to helmets. So Lime are rolling out a new helmet lock mid next year, which we'll see further improvements around the use of helmets and the protection of helmets with a bike as well. So in terms of the contract, so the current contract with Lime is set to expire in December 2025. So the city has commenced the process, the procurement process, to enter into a new contract. So our plan is to go out to market for a new contract. It's an open public tender because we're expecting a lot of interest from a lot of different operators. So we're expecting that to go out around mid next year. And have a new contract in place towards the end of next year. So in terms of the new contract, so we have got a lot of learnings that we're going to take across into the new contract. So first and foremost, a lot of the initiatives that I've mentioned today and a lot of existing improvements that exist with the scheme, outcomes that we've reached in partnership with Lime, which aren't necessarily built into the contract. So first and foremost, the new contract will build in all of the learnings, all of the new initiatives. So things I mentioned about operating zones, parking zones will be built in. But what will be a new change for the new contract is what we've seen from our research recently is that a lot of other councils are moving to charging an operator fee for line bikes, for a bike share scheme. So, and that's something that's fairly new, but it's something that we see as a definite benefit for us as well. So the new contract, we're looking to have a fee associated with that, with the intent being that that fee will be used by the city to improve cycling infrastructure as well. So, in closing, the city's bike share scheme continues to be very successful. We've seen more than 2.5 million trips on a Lime bike, seeing on average 82,000 trips a month. It's from a broader transport strategy perspective, it's helping reduce reliance on private vehicles. It's a sustainable alternative transport outcome, and it's certainly something we're very proud of. Lime continue to be great to work with, and the current contract is set to expire towards the end of next year, and we'll be going out to market soon to get a new contract in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you for the work you've done. I'd say in the last 12, 18 months, I've seen a huge improvement in my area. I'm not sure about other councillors, but I think over the last 12, 18 months, working closely to get some good outcomes, I think we've been going in the right direction. Very popular service. It's important that the learnings we take is built into the next contract to ensure that we keep the amenity of our areas clean and tidy, but provide an active transport. So just the team, what you've achieved in 12, 18 months from where we were, I would say 12 months ago. I did notice there was the reduction. I'm presuming that reduction in bikes had a benefit impact moving forward. Can I get your thoughts on the reduction of the numbers on the roads?
Yeah, through the chair. So what we've found is we've got a much better balance now between demand for bikes versus amenity in our public spaces for those people that may not necessarily want to take a ride on a Lime bike. So there's a much better balance now between how many bikes you're seeing in those public spaces. So, but importantly, the number of trips that we're getting on Lime bikes is still high, which means we've still got the right number of bikes out there too.
Councillor Young?
Just wondered about the end of trip photo verification. Is that something unique to the Gold Coast, or is that being implemented elsewhere, do you think?
No, through the chair, that technology is being used elsewhere as well, yep, and with other providers also.
Great. So there's to be no gap in the service, like with the contract expiring, the new contract will be implemented before that occurs?
Through the chair, yes.
And what's the scope or potential to increase the geographic range? I'm thinking about going west of the motorway to include the CBD of Nerang, for example, or another centre like that. Is that feasible, and how would we go about it?
Through the chair, the beauty of a geofence is it's a virtual boundary, so it's quite easy to amend that, provided there's support to do so and the right demand and infrastructure. So it's relatively straightforward.
But presumably there need to be some preliminary investigation of that and the implications of extending that. I presume that would require either an amended motion here or a general business motion to seek that investigation, or do you think that would be necessary?
Through the chair, no, it's not the area is flexible. There's no mandated reason that the boundary has to be the boundary. We've been flexible about it in the past and can make that change quite quickly.
I'll write to the EGM and request that be looked at. Thank you. Thanks, Chairman.
Councillor O'Neill?
Thanks, Chair. Not that I'm complaining about the reduction in the fleet, because I think it's actually working, and certainly things have improved in my area with Lime bikes lying around for days on end. But it was just interesting to hear you say that that the trips are still the same, because I'm gathering that the way it is now, it's more tourists that are hiring bikes rather than say residents hiring bikes to go say to work and back, or trips to a friend's house or something like that, because I think that's what's been taken out, and it's really only they're staying within a sort of centralised area. Is that the feedback that you're getting from Lime bikes themselves?
Yeah, through the chair, yes. I think the split was roughly around 70-30, 70% sort of tourists, 30% locals off the top of my head. So, and the scheme did operate heavily during COVID as well, so which gave us a really good indication of the local tourists as well, and it was continued to be very successful during that time too. So no, there is certainly a commuter function to Lime bikes and local function as well, but we certainly see during peak tourist seasons that there's a significant increase in trips as well.
Councillor Gates, did you have a question?
Oh, yeah, thank you, Chair. Through you. Dan, can you just explain to me the mandatory parking zone expansion and what actually was undertaken, that it's completed and operational at virtual parking pins?
Yep. So prior to, let's say, this month, what was occurring was in the so basically anywhere west of the Gold Coast Highway, a person could take a trip on a Lime bike out to the western area to any residential street, essentially. And because it was a dockless scheme, they could end their trip wherever was appropriate to do so in terms of, beside a footpath or something like that. What we've mandated now, because of concerns raised about bikes being left in inappropriate locations to the west, a mandatory parking zone has now been implemented across the whole service area. So what that means is basically we have virtual parking pins. So it's an area, a designated virtual zone where a bike has to be parked. So I can't now take a trip west of the Gold Coast Highway and park it anywhere. I have to park it at the nearest parking pin. Like if I was to try and end my trip outside of a parking pin, I continue to have to pay for it, and I risk being warned and fined if I don't park it at a virtual parking pin. So is that...
Yeah, how many parking pins are there?
Too many to know, but many. And they're still, and obviously because this is a relatively new change as well, we're still finding new locations to put them, still learning locations where they shouldn't be as well. But essentially the idea, the way this model has worked in other cities is that, say, a parking pin would ideally be located within every street that has demand for a Lime bike. So that's the idea of it, but it might also be, say, a park that nearby that you put a virtual parking pin.
Thank you.
And there is actually a app for Lime bikes, and actually shows the pins where you can park your bikes. I think that was a challenge over a period of time, is how many pins are out there. So I think the review of the pins was part of that, and also designating docking areas. The product that we hopefully will see moving forward is used in other cities around the world, and it works really well. Have seen it where you ride your bike, been on the bikes myself, where it actually clearly shows you where to go, designatedly park your bike, you take the photo, you must engage the helmet. If you don't, it will continue to charge. My understanding is Lime Bike look at upgrading their fleet to improve that technology. But I think what we've achieved in the short period of time in these understandings to ensure that moving forward a new contract, whoever wins the contract, we've already got the conditions in place to ensure whoever wins the tender understands it and ensures that gets rolled out. And the only other question I would have for the team is, do we have powers as a city to fine a operator if they're not meeting their KPIs? Because my understanding is the operator will charge the user, but if they're not meeting our KPIs, is there the ability to manage that also?
Through the chair, we're currently working with procurement to understand what options we have in that space. So,
Councillor Doran.
Thank you, Chair. Dan, if we reduced it to 1,300 bikes? What's the city's or the officer's view as the optimal number? If it's come down to 1,300, is that where we think it needs to sit, or is it going to come down further, or what's the view?
Through the chair, so we've trialled 750 bikes, and then we've tried a lot more than 1,300 bikes as well. So I think we're probably sitting around the sweet spot the way things have been going. So I think, yeah, it's probably about right now, but we're still testing that out over the next couple of months because 1300 only rolled out. I think it was about 2 months ago now. So we are still testing 1300, but it seems to be going well at this point in time.
Chair, just a couple of quick questions if I could. So the experience of Lime Bike Stand in the western part of the city, Robina, Varsity Lakes, Burleigh Waters, is, in my experience, probably different to where it is on the coastal strip. We tend to experience dumping more than anything, and so I was really welcoming of the idle bike KPI that was put in place. But could you talk to me about, it says here that they're 100% in adhering to that KPI. I feel as if that's probably not accurate based on my visual cue. So I'm also interested in the new app you've got, so the new third-party app you've got. But the experience in the western suburbs is they get dumped on our roads, they become an eyesore, and they don't get moved within, I think it's 48 hours is the requirement. How are they reporting to you on that they're actually adhering to that?
So through the chair, so that's as part of the KPI evaluation that we do approximately every 6 months. They're basically
it's a self-assessment though. Is that self-assessment though, or do we check that?
It has been traditionally. So the third-party program we now have access to gives us direct access to that data. So we've set up a process now where we're basically able to review how all bikes are tracking each week against those KPI data sets, which gives us the ability to basically send information to Lime about any bikes that aren't meeting their KPI requirements. So access to that program is a significant improvement for us, and it's going to give us better oversight to make sure those situations don't happen.
So am I right to assume now it is heavily reliant on the community reporting an idle bike or a dumped bike via the app?
Through the chair, Lime have a process set up in their system where if a bike has sat idle for the KPI is 3 days, it gets a move alert, and that sends them out there to relocate that bike.
Did you say 3 days?
3 days. So last year at committee, it was a 5-day KPI, and council requested that we reduce that down from 5 days to 3 days, and so that's now the KPI requirement, and they've set up basically an alarm system that alerts them to that.
Chair, just one final question. One of the major frustrations with the community in my area is as I say, the dumped bikes. Not so much the fact that they are in around, but they're dumped, and one of the most common suggestions that are provided to me is that there is docking stations and what the perceived to be more stricter regulations on the users. We don't have docking stations. I know you just mentioned we have virtual parking pins, which sound a bit like everywhere except the no parking zones that are in red on the app. Why don't we have the docking station model here on the Gold Coast?
So through the chair, when the resolution was made back in 2019, I think it was, for a bike share scheme. So it was proposed to be a dockless scheme and supported. The not having a docked scheme allows a lot greater flexibility for a service. A rider is able to take a bike and basically take it on a trip wherever suits them. The docking station model is very restrictive, so you'll see less trips undertaken on a bike because you don't have the ability to ride it wherever you want to. So that was a significant thought. Another important consideration too is the cost of a docking station scheme as well. So there's some information in the report. We had a quote for 50 docking stations back in 2019. I think it was a $3.5 million cost to install that. So that's obviously a significant piece of infrastructure for the city. And also what's happening in the docking station space too is a lot of councils have moved away from docking stations because they are expensive, because they're not as easy to move and they're not as easy to use versus the new technology, which allows it's quick, it's cheap, it's very easy to basically implement, and you can be a lot more flexible with where they're located and when.
Chair, as we go towards the contract renewal next year, And I know that it wasn't council's resolution to docking stations. As a new councillor, it feels like most of the community would like a certain place for them to be. I wonder whether or not that option for someone tendering for this contract could be considered, as if they want to put forward that option. I note that based on the data in the report, Chair, 2.5 million trips at an average of about $7 a trip. There's quite a significant sum over a 4-year period that's been made by this operator. So there is some profit there, I'd assume. So maybe we can put some extra burdens back onto the operator to help clean up the suburbs in the west, noting that the travel time is usually from the coast to the west, and then they stay, and then we have to idle them back to the coast. And I'd wonder if we would be able to include that in as an option in the next contract or tender.
Yep, happy to look into that. That's fine.
Thank you, Chair.
I just want to extend on that. The docking scheme, obviously, we're trying to get a balance between an actual docking parking bay and the pins. I think the challenge I found in my area as well was how many pins are in an area. So you can get on the app, but reviewing where those pins are and and how they're being used is one area we could improve. We will have some understanding of some docking bays where we think it's appropriate to the city. The 3-day idle for me is interesting because 3 days is a long time, and an abandoned bike is an idle bike in my view, and that's what the consumer sees. 3 days, in my view, is a long time seeing it idle. In a lot of cases, they're idle because they're abandoned. Is there a way that we can review that 3-day, and what do we think is an appropriate time frame, particularly in other areas?
Through the chair, yeah, I'm happy to talk with Lime about that, keeping in mind that they need to have the time to be able to do that. Otherwise, you might lose attention in other areas of the scheme, and that might cause negative impacts as well. But yeah, more than happy to see what's feasible in terms of reducing that time frame down. So yep, we can do that.
I just think it's important that we are, at the moment, given a product that I think is a benefit to the city. I think we all know that, but at the same time, there's a product that there's a private enterprise making it's a commercial business, and I think we've got to get the balance right in that space and understanding. I think that idle time is really important. That's the community space. If they're using our land, it'd be nice to know that if commercial's using it, they are picking it up in a reasonable time. So, Councillor Doran.
Thank you, Chair. So I think I would be very supportive of that. I think the general feeling in my community, and I do have a question, is that the bike share scheme is welcome but needs to be better managed in the western suburbs, and I certainly agree with that view. Is it possible to get, I only say division because we're in council, is it possible to get divisional data as to the amount of rides that are commenced and concluded in our area and the average trip time and where the idle bikes are found, so that we're able to be better forearmed to communicate with our residents around some of the details? I recently had a few residents surprised that there was 2.5 million trips used in the 4 years, and I think that extra data would help us communicate a more positive message.
Through the chair, yes, we can access that data. Happy to, we can contact your office and find out what you want in particular and consult with Lime about how we get that to you.
And could I just confirm, moving forward, a new contract would allow us to actually access the data and us visually see it? So our concern is obviously the third party is providing the information. What we're saying is we will have access to that data moving forward to, again, if we have a concern, we can go to our office to confirm that that concern.
Correct. We have live access to that.
Okay, brilliant. Do we have any more questions? I'm happy to. Questions, Councillor Tozer? Yep. Councillor Tozer, move it. I'm happy to second it. Does anyone want to speak to the motion? Anyone against? Councillor Tozer, did you want to close?
Other than vehicles to move around the city, and whilst there's been some teething problems in every one of our divisions at different times, I think it's really great to see Lime working so proactively to come up with some suitable solutions, and the more people who ride, the healthier we are, and also the less cars there are on the road.
Thank you, Dan. As I said at the beginning, I think it's important to the city, but it's important the learnings we improve moving forward when we go out to contract, so that we can have a scheme that benefits the community but also protects our community assets, which are the parks, pathways, and our community. So thank you very much. Put the motion to you. All in favour? Carry. Thank you. Move to 6.5, transport network planning priorities. Nick Prasser, this is a roundup of our monthly transport regional areas.
Through the chair, this effectively is the summary report of each of our 5 regional areas that we went through, and I guess it's the promised report that brings that sort of summary level of priorities for each of the different programs.
As EGM Michael outlined, this is a summary of the 5 presentations I recently provided to the committee. That outlines the 5 previous presentations. So the content of the report and of the presentations at strategic level, and there are some particular topics and future transport planning considerations which will be future council papers and or require councillor briefings. So there's quite a few previous resolutions relating to the content of the paper. Obviously the transport strategy and our modal plans, which have been adopted by council, local government infrastructure plan, obviously the last 5 presentations, and a lot of the initiatives that are outlined in today's presentation are in the 4-year capital expenditure program. Strategic alignment, I won't touch on this too much, but obviously connected communities is the theme of Gold Coast 2032 that relates to transport, and we do have some outcomes that we are trying to achieve, trying to provide a safe and sustainable travel choices to enable us to move around the city easily. And from a performance perspective, we have 2 measures: travel time reliability, noting that the word doesn't say travel time efficiency, it says reliability. There is a difference, and daily trips using public, active and shared transport. So a lot of these initiatives are already in our transport strategy and our modal plans. So the Gold Coast Road Network Plan, which was endorsed by Council in 2018, it supports safe and reliable movement of people and goods. It does recognise that we can't do this alone. We have to work in partnership with the Queensland Government, both in terms of road network management, but also new project delivery. And we will continue to invest in our road network to accommodate growth. We do have special emphasis on our primary traffic congestion hotspots, being Yattle and Stapleton, Coomera, Pimpamar and Robina Central. So our key priorities from a road network development perspective, M1 interchange upgrades are required at exit 38, 45 and 82. New roads, so we have a suite of new roads that we are looking to implement, in particular roads such as Pimpamar West Service Road. Road capacity upgrades, where we need to upgrade the road from a 2 to 4 lane cross section, for example, Earle Road. Intersection upgrades, so we have a suite of intersections that we need to upgrade in terms of improving safety and their capacity, and some roads that currently have a rural configuration, we're looking at upgrading them to an urban standard. And we have 2 key bits of 2 studies happening at the moment: Coomera Road Network Study, which we're doing in partnership with the state, and the Robina Gateway Study. I won't go into this to too much detail, but there is the list of the road network upgrades in our forward pipeline. These are all the projects we've got on our program in the Atlas Stapleton area. All the projects or initiatives we've got in the Pimpamar area. We're doing the road network study for Coomera. Very important that we work with the state to come up with solutions for that. And obviously the Coomera Connector is currently being constructed, and that's a $3 billion investment from the state. One key bits of what we'd like to see as a city administration is that blue line there. We believe to get the proper benefits from the Coomera Connector, it really should be extended through to Pimpamar, to the end of Earle Road. So we should be advocating to get that constructed once stage 1 of Coomera Connector is complete. Robina Central is another key area for us.
Councillor Gates, did you have a quick question?
Thanks, Chairman. Just in that regard, through you, I've had a conversation with the member for Coomera, who's recently become a member of the Parliament, which is great news. In the lead up to the state election, he committed $5 million to a business case around the M1 and interchanges, but he's also been with me lobbying for exactly what you just suggested, the Coomera Connector to go through to Uwalpa Road. And I was wondering today if I could move a change recommendation when the time comes, that simply because it's a new government, that I could add that the Mayor writes to the Premier and the Minister, the Honourable Brent Mickelberg, requesting urgent consideration of the extension of the Coomera Connector to Pimpamar, because in discussion with Mr Crandon, although we've done as much as we possibly can with the former government, it would be good at this point in time, while they're still going, to try and get some support, because I note in the report, it's suggested on page 70 that the Coomera Connector Stage 1 will take the pressure off exit 54. But I'm guessing you mean only in terms of southbound traffic, because otherwise northbound traffic will dump onto Foxwell Road and Coomera Link Road and make it even worse. So if I can get support to add a 2 to the recommendation today and outline that, I'd be very grateful.
Yeah, finish your report and we can come back to it. Councillor Gates, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Gates. Robina Central is another hotspot that we are doing a lot of planning work in. You can see there by the map. We've recently upgraded 4 intersections. We're currently upgrading another intersection, the red intersection there, and then we have another suite of intersections that need to be upgraded. But the biggest initiative that is required for the area is an upgrade to exit 82 and the adjacent intersection of Robina Parkway and Labour Drive. We believe that those 2 projects need to be done together to get the maximum benefits. So we would like to see a state partnership with regards to fixing that traffic congestion problem there in Robina Central. Southern Gold Coast, as we know, the M1's being upgraded, and that does include that service road that will link Palm Beach and Eleanor with Burleigh. We've seen this diagram before. You can see over time what the north-south network capacity will be when all the different transport modal initiatives are implemented. So it's quite extensive. And we have in the pipeline an upgrade to Palm Beach Avenue in the next few years. Intersection upgrades, I've mentioned this before, we've got a lot of T intersections across the city, priority controlled, that will need to be signalised as traffic grows. It's difficult for motorists to turn right out of those intersections, so we'll be fixing those up. Obviously, the intersection of Robina Town Centre Drive and Labour Drive is a high priority. It's being constructed now. Beatty Road, the 2 intersections there with Dreamwell Parkway, Whitewater Way, are also a priority for us, but we have a whole suite of intersections that we are looking at signalising over the next few years. And I mentioned before, there's a few roads that currently have a rural configuration that we want to upgrade to an urban standard. So, you know, one of our priority ones is Gilston Road at Nerang, which really has a very poor standard in terms of pedestrian and active transport facilities, and good example there what the difference between a rural and an urban road is. We've also got a lot of those roads where we want to work with developers in the Yatala, Luscombe, Stapleton area to improve their standard, so we can actually get some of these 30-metre Super B doubles and A doubles into and out of those industrial areas. In terms of public transport, obviously our number one priority would be extending the light rail to Coolangatta, which is stage 4, and extending the light rail to the airport. We've also got an opportunity to look at the new train stations at Pimpama, Hope Island and Merrimack and see what we can do in terms of active transport connectivity and land use around those new train stations. High quality east-west mass transit corridors, potentially being bus rapid transit, will need to be looked at in the future. There are 2 current corridors, one from Nerang to Broadbeach that the Department of Transport Main Roads are currently doing a business case for, and the other one is linking Robina Station up with Miami. We've done some preliminary planning for that, but it's really up to the state that really needs to drive that these initiatives moving forward. Another thing we need to look at is continuing our partnership with the state to tactically improve bus services. The Northern bus service initiatives is a great success, and we need to harness those opportunities and look at other areas where we can improve bus service in terms of frequency and hours of operation. And obviously our ongoing bus stop upgrades are very important. We get a lot of good feedback about those type of projects. In terms of active transport, so our priorities are completing the Ocean Way. So our vision is for 36-kilometre of continuous high quality path from the Spit to Coolangatta. We have 6 missing sections, and I won't get into too much detail about these. This will be subject to a future report, but our focus is to complete those 6 missing sections over the next 10 years. Some of them aren't going to be easy, but it's important if we want to achieve our vision. Building green bridges to improve network connectivity. We're doing the planning for a couple at the moment, where we're looking at breaking down the barrier of canals and the M1 to improve walking and cycling opportunities for people. Developing high quality east-west cycleways. So I mentioned this before, we have the Ocean Way, we have a Vela Way on the Coomera Connector. We want to start linking those with good east-west cycleways. The first one we're looking at is the Southport Rail Trail. Obviously, continuity of our shared path program. We uplifted investment in that program a few years ago, and we know that we've got a significant pipeline of projects that we want to roll out over the next 10 years. We will start implementing a signalised pedestrian crossing program. As we know, with increased traffic across the city, it can be difficult for people to cross roads. So we are putting together a signalised pedestrian crossing program. The first couple that will be off will be Santa Barbara at Hope Island and at Mudgeeraba at Old Coach Road will be the 2 that we kick off, but we'll have a whole suite of those projects coming through as a program. And we're starting to look at investing in smaller scale missing length path projects, and we've already implemented a lot of those across the city with what we call a design light approach, where we can get in and fix up those little missing 50-metre lengths and curb ramps and cut through islands and things like that. In terms of transport asset management, we are pioneering a new asset management maturity excellence program, and to meet rapid growth and evolving needs of the city. From a transport perspective, we'll be advancing our asset monitoring and forecasting. There will be a focus on preventative action. We have a suite of traffic signals across the city. We've got 90-odd traffic signals that were built in the 1980s that require refurbishing and upgrading to modern standards. And we also have a suite of ageing bridges that will need to be rehabilitated. In particular, 2 will need to be replaced, one on Casserary Drive and another one on Salerno Street. In terms of strategic transport planning, short-term priorities including our major cycleways into LGIP, establishing a transport policy aligned with the local growth management plan. So we're working closely with city planning in the development of the local growth management plan, modernising our transport strategy alongside the development of the new planning scheme, Initiating a transport corridor preservation regime. So, Transport Planning 101 is to plan and preserve your corridors. So we'll be going and looking at what land do we require, and are there any strategic opportunities for us to go in and secure that land, those properties, to preserve that corridor. And another initiative on our agenda is to collaborate with developers in the state to deliver transport infrastructure. So external delivery agreements. We've already got a couple in place with the state, and there's a few more in the pipeline. That's it, Chap.
Councillor Gates.
Thanks, Chair. Through you, I'm just interested in the prioritisation of green bridges, given the history and my recollection. Oh, well, you won. Yeah, I'm simply interested how it gets to be the number 2 priority when twice that I can recall that proposition has been rejected because of the cost and the considered benefits in comparison to the cost. So how does it become the second top priority over and above east-west connections? I don't understand.
Through the chair, I wouldn't say it's the second priority. They were just a list of priorities. But we did get council to support in principle us going away and planning for a suite of green bridge ideas. They included green bridges at linking Florida Gardens with Broadbeach, looking at some green bridges up at Pimpamar, and a few others. So we've got in-principle support to go away and do the planning. So at this point in time, they are ideas. Yes, some of them might cost a bit, but we are looking at, as part of that planning process, looking at a range of configurations from a lower cost sort of configuration through to something a little bit more elaborate, and running it through our options assessment to work out what is the best value for the city. So green bridges are part of a suite of solutions. It's not the solution. It is a part of a suite of solutions. So active transport is part of a multimodal approach we need to take to advance our transport system.
Thank you. I totally support the active transport initiatives, and we've seen the benefit through many programs. I have a comfort that something will come back to us later, so that we can make a valid consideration of whether funds are better going into green bridges or into the transport network, where we absolutely recognise we need to make a significant investment.
And I believe the green bridges is part of the whole network, and obviously there's many bridges throughout the whole city that's got to be considered. So I'll be expecting those to come back case by case to see which we prioritise moving forward. So, Councillor Young.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the presentation, Nick. I noticed in your list of public transport priorities on page 63, you haven't listed the east-west connections, but it is listed in the appendix, which I was pleased to see. The appendix 2, which deals with public transport, identifies those east-west connections for passenger transport. So am I missing something? Am I reading something wrong into this that it's not listed? Unless it's just
It's there.
Implement high-quality mass transit corridors.
It was in there. Did you say?
With potential use of a bus rapid transit. That's the one. Thank you. You didn't mention the Velaway as part of the active transport thing, and obviously that's a state government initiative alongside the Currumbin Connector, and obviously going to go further south. But it's a really exciting prospect, Chairman, and I've recently had some discussions with Nick about the connection from the Velaway, which will be adjacent to the Currumbin Connector, and then linking that to the, a couple of spots. One is that eastward connection through the rail trail, and the other one is possibly westward towards the Gold Coast Cycle Centre, because that's a key facility for cyclists, and it makes sense to have a connection. So there's some pretty impressive plans that have been developed for that, and I just wanted to draw attention to that matter. The Currumbin connector, I certainly will support Councillor Gates' proposed amendment to the motion. It's never really occurred to me, but this just seems to drop off the end of the world. It just dumps all the traffic onto Foxwell Road. Is that right?
Correct.
It's ludicrous. Yeah, that's the plan. So that little red link there, that Currumbin, that's connecting to Foxwell. Great. Thank you.
Any more questions? Any more questions? No. Councillor Gates
Thanks,
has a
Chair.
change recommendation. I'm happy to.
If that's acceptable, yes. So one, where are we? Yep, that the report be received and contents noted. Number 2, that the Mayor writes to the Premier and Minister, the Honourable Brent Mickelberg, requesting urgent consideration of the extension of the Coomera Connector to Yawalpa Road, Pimpama. Oh, sorry, Yawalpa, Y-A-L-P-A-H. And it should be to, not the, to Yawalpa Road. Thanks.
And the minister's name?
Oh, okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, Brett, the Honourable Brett Mickelberg, M-I-C-K-L-E-B-E-R-G. I didn't put the Premier's name in because I'm sure everyone knows, but I thought maybe they didn't know the new minister. What'd you say? Thank you. And if I could just speak to that, I would like...
And Councillor Young. Thank you.
I simply want to say what a great job the branch has done in doing the 5 different presentations right across the city to give us all an understanding of the needs across the city, because we can become a little parochial and focused on our own area, especially Councillor Doran and myself, because I think that Robina and Coomera have been highlighted over and over again as being problematic. So thank you for accepting my change today. It's a real concern what will happen once the Coomera Connector opens in just the first stage, and I'm hoping that everyone's proven wrong and it does make a significant change to traffic on Foxwell Road. I don't know if we've ever done the account of how much traffic heads south as opposed to heading north as it enters 54, but it would be interesting to know, because if the majority is heading north, we're not going to see a massive change. But to take it through to Yawalpa Road was always considered, I think, by our officers to be what was necessary in stage 1. We unfortunately didn't have the capacity to affect that change, but perhaps the new government, with members who are really familiar with the congestion problems around Hope Island. I know Councillor Fowler has significant issues about the Coomera Connector and Hope Island, and I should imagine our Premier, Mr Crisafulli, will have a great knowledge of that too. So just to reinforce, and having spoken with Mr Crandon only today, I know that he is 100% supportive of this inclusion today, and he'll do everything that he can to support a better outcome for Northern Gold Coast. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone like to speak for the motion? For? Councillor Hamill?
and thank the support staff for upgrading the minister to his correct name. Thanks for that. That was going to point that one out. Mr. Chair, so very happy to support Councillor Gates's change, but wanted to echo her comments around how useful I've found the presentation of the 5 different areas, and then just bringing it together today to bring that whole of city view of it. I have to really admit that I thought I had an understanding of what projects and what priorities were in the south and the central and the west of the city, but have found, especially participating in the briefings before committee and then seeing it all tied together, that it's definitely increased my understanding of the whole of network approach and where everything kind of fits together a bit more. So again, to Nick and the entire team, thank you for pulling it together that way. And now the important part begins of starting to tick some of these projects off, so that when we get further updates in the future, it's here's the state of the network and these are the projects we've got knocked off.
Anyone want to speak against? I'd just like to thank Nick and the team for the presentations and everyone being involved. I think it's been really informative for councillors, but particularly new councillors, and us understanding where we're going moving forward. Obviously, as a growing city, we've still got a lot of growing to be done, and we hope with this state election recently, a change of government, we can hopefully get more focus on the Gold Coast. So thank you, team, for what you've done, and look forward to more reports and changes moving forward. So thank you very much. I put the motion to you. All in favour? Carry. Thank you. Thanks, Nick. .6 Road Asset Management Program Development. Nick, are you still the...
Thank you, Chair. Next agenda item is Road Asset Management Program Development. So the purpose of this paper is to provide an overview of the city's road asset management program development process. So this is part of a 4-step process. The first step was a showcase that many of you attended back in October, where we had the iPave vehicle out the back of chambers here that showcased the new technology we're using to pick up our road condition data. We're now in step 2, which is advising how we develop the program. And then we've got 2 more steps, bringing back a report to committee early next year about investment. So getting all the data and then putting it together into an investment program ahead of budget deliberations. And the 4th step is to refresh our strategic road pavement strategy, which was endorsed by Council back in 2021. So they're the previous resolutions. So the first one was endorsement of the Sustainable Road Pavement Management Plan back in April 21, and then April 22 there was another report, which, you know, the outcome of that report was a significant uplift in investment in our road rehabilitation program. So asset management is a systematic approach. It is there to optimise costs, risks, performance and sustainability, and at the end of the day is to maximise value for ratepayers. So, you know, the elements of good asset management is to know where your assets are and what are their attributes. So an inventory, obviously what are the conditions and what will be their condition in 10 years' time. What is their intervention strategy? So, you know, what do we need to maintain them, renew them, replace them? And, you know, what is the intervention? Investment, so, you know, what funding levels are required? And the last one is just continuous improvement, and we've shown that with the iPave vehicle. So City Road assets, it's one of our largest asset bases. We've got over 3,000 kilometres of sealed road, of which 600 odd are major roads and 2,500 are minor roads. And our road network asset base has doubled since the 1970s, as you can see there on the graph. So it's particularly important that we take a very strategic, tactical approach to managing our road network asset base. Just a little bit of a overview of how roads are constructed. People just look at roads and just think it's the black stuff on the top, and it's not. There's a lot that goes into constructing a road. We have a subgrade, we have a subbase, a base, and then a surface. And they all have their own part to play in making sure that the roads are safe, comfortable to drive on, and hold up in particular weather events and under heavy loads of traffic. There are many different types of defects. The typical types, we all know about potholes, but there are many others: cracking, rutting, flushing, shoving, corrugation and ravelling, delamination, edge breaks and upheaval. And they're all caused by pretty much the same thing. Water infiltration is the enemy of road pavements. Yes, traffic action as well, particularly if we've got high volumes or lots of heavy vehicles using them. Some of these defects can come about with insufficient pavement thickness. So roads, particularly our rural roads that have more traffic on them, their pavements obviously are thinner, and over time there's defects, and there are some poor design and construction methodologies, but the main factor is water infiltration. So we have a number of programs. Obviously, we have our maintenance program. It's reactive, pothole repairs, minor patching. We have a preservation program where we go in and we do called chip sealing, slurry sealing, and polymer injections. We have a surface renewal program, which is the overlays, so the midlife rejuvenation overlays and mill and fill projects, and our heavy patching. And then reconstruction, where we go in and pretty much the road's at its end of its life, and we go and reconstruct all the layers of the road. And normally when we do that type of project, we also look at what other improvements can we do. Do we need to improve the drainage? Do we need to change the configuration of the lanes, put in bike lanes, fix up driveway and path grades and things like that? So it really is a full reconstruction of the road. And then we have a curb and channel renewal program as well. That one is particularly important because that helps solve some problems in terms of drainage and pooling of water. And as we know, water is the enemy of pavement. You can see there with the graph through the whole life cycle process of managing our roads. From when they're constructed new, we try to go in there and preserve them. We have a midlife rejuvenation, and then towards the end of its life, it's a reconstruction. But what we need to focus on is start looking at the preservation and getting in doing preventative maintenance. But before we can get that, we have a gap to fill in terms of reconstruction and renewals. In terms of program development, this is the framework we use. I'll go through this in a little bit more. So the first process is a condition assessment. We do two types. One is a visual inspections. So we do a visual inspection of our roads on an annual basis. And we record all the issues to do with the road, not just the road pavement, but a whole suite of issues. And then what was every 4 years, we're now looking at doing it every second year, is the citywide surveys using the new technology in the iPave in terms of ground penetrating radar and laser and so forth technology. And that's just some outputs that we get that we'll be getting from that data collection, which we'll be then putting into what we call our pavement management system. So the system that the city uses is called Go Asset, and we'll get all that data and put that into this software program. It will then inform and help us optimise our investment decisions. And it calculates what we call a pavement condition index, a PCI. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about that, but it's basically a health score. It's like a report card that we used to get at school. It goes from 0 to 10, and 10 being the best, 0 being the worst. It also, the Go Asset also helps us predict future pavement deterioration. So you put all the attributes in, and it can tell us and do some modelling and tell us what the condition of that road will be in 10 years' time. So it helps us with our longer term thinking, and the PMS also helps us do scenario testing. So we can test a number of different scenarios in terms of if we've only got a certain amount of funding, what can we do? If we change the different types of mitigation treatments, if we change our levels of service, what are the different scenarios we can use moving forward? And it really is a helpful tool, very sophisticated tool to use. So there's a pavement condition index that we use. So our level of service targets, which were approved by Council back in April 21 through the Sustainable Road Pavement Management Plan, was an average PCI score of 8.5 on our major roads, which is very good, and an average PCI score of 7.5 on minor roads, which is still quite good. So 10-year schedule, that's the next stage. So once we do the condition assessment, put it into our PMS, we come up with a 10-year schedule. So that's our longer term schedule of works in terms of road rehabilitation. We'll have a focus on our major roads for obvious reasons, but what we're thinking, putting away 20% of the funding to invest in our critical minor roads. And the prioritisation is based on a number of filters. And the first filter is obviously looking at those roads that haven't met our level of service target. Then obviously focusing on those that have a lower score, PCI score. And then the next filter is looking at the road function. So obviously our arterials will have a higher priority than some of our major collectors, industrial collectors and things like that. So we've come up with this prioritisation methodology, which we'll use in the PMS to run our 10-year schedule. Out of the 10-year schedule, we then develop a 4-year program. So we take all the data we get from the 10-year schedule. We do a lot more definitive investigations. We do geotechnical analysis, material testing, so some borehole testing. We do a lot of pavement design work, and that confirms the defect type and extent, and what is the best treatment, what is the cost. And other matters that we do consider when developing the 4-year program: is there a pattern of regular ongoing maintenance in a particular section of road? Are there any opportunities to group some projects together to get economies of scale? And is there opportunities to align with other city projects and state projects? So we might be looking at upgrading an intersection, refurbishing traffic signals. We'll also do some road rehabilitation works as part of that project. And then we come up with the rolling 4-year program, which is approved by Council as part of the annual budget deliberation process. And then we get into our 1-year delivery cycle, and we package those up and they're delivered. We do have an asphalt contract. We've got two contractors that do our renewals, and we're now looking at what opportunities we have in terms of our preservation program and coming together and putting some contracts together in terms of bitumen reseal and a lot of preventative maintenance as well. So just to sum up, it is a systematic life cycle approach to managing our road assets. It's based on condition and criticality, obviously. It does optimise costs and risks, service performance and long-term sustainability. And moving forward, we're looking at moving into step 3, which is getting the data, condition data, and running it through our PMS and coming up with an investment strategy, which we would like to report to Council next year.
Councillor Gates.
Thanks, Chairman. Just a question through you to Mr. Prasser. I'm interested in the ratio being spent on major roads as opposed to minor roads, given the fact that there's 4 times more length of minor roads that clearly our ratepayers would be using daily. How was the 80-20 split decided?
So if we just focus on the major roads and prioritise it that way, the minor roads wouldn't get any funding. Obviously, our focus needs to be on our major roads. That's where we have the majority of traffic. That's where we have the higher speeds. That's where we have a lot of our heavy vehicles. So we thought we would need to, as the first filter, we would need to come up with some sort of proportional split. So we've come up with 80-20. We can obviously run some scenario testing through our PMS system to see if that is a viable proportion, but
it interests me from the because we're not talking main roads here because they're controlled by Department of Main Roads. So what are you terming major roads in our city?
Through the chair, so arterial roads, so those roads that are in our local government infrastructure plan, our trunk roads, arterials, sub-arterials, tourist esplanades, and some of our major collectors and industrial collectors are our what we classify as our major roads or trunk roads.
Okay, I just think there's an imbalance there. I mean, coming from the perspective of representing ratepayers and the condition of their street is just as important to them. 80-20 when there's 4 times as many local roads seems an unusual split to me, but obviously I'm not an expert in the engineering side of things, so I just wanted to know how it was.
Yeah.
Was it just a figure that you decided on?
I think there's been some modelling done, but if you look at the value of the assets too, obviously for some of those major roads with significant pavement depths, your multi-lane versus some of the local roads. But yeah, we can probably provide some more analytics to how that was broken down. Yeah, because it's an important element. And I guess one is driven by greatest investment needs. So if you just looked at the road hierarchy and you ran an algorithm, all the investment would go into the high order roads because from an economic and, the drivers of, transportation, etc., high ESAs or high vehicle numbers. But there's also a service standard equity element, which as a local government, to your very point, there's an equity element. We're not just driven by, economic return on an asset base. So maybe you can bring some more information back for you as we go into the budget process on that.
Thank you.
I actually don't have a question, Chair, but when you're ready, I've got a change recommendation.
So I presume that when we're dealing with our major roads, a lot of them are double lanes, and we just count that as 1 kilometre of road compared to 1 kilometre of single lane road, and the double lane possibly takes twice as much work and money to get it to the basic same standard. Thanks. That's confirmed. Thank you.
More questions? No. Councillor Hamill, you might have a change.
Mr. Chair, I've provided the support officers with a change recommendation.
So I don't know if you've got a seconder for this at this stage, but okay, Councillor Tozer, and I'm happy to.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering, before I speak to it, just on Councillor Gates' point about the 80-20 split, I didn't include that specifically in this change recommendation, but are officers comfortable that as part of this that would be considered anyway, or would you like it specifically called out? I think it has to be looked at as probably holistically anyway. Mr. Vaughan?
Yes, we're comfortable. Yeah, we can do that as part of the report back.
Yeah. Happy for me to speak to it, Mr. Chair?
Yep.
So, Mr. Chair, just for full transparency, I discussed this change recommendation with officers beforehand. While I was fairly happy with what was put forward, I really wanted to make an emphasis on the point that we as committee and council, our biggest control point on this is the policy. It's the paper, and I think if you look at page 95 in the report, where it talks about the Table 9 road rehabilitation investment prioritisation criteria, that comes from the policy. To me, it's the most important funnel in all of this, that all the new data from the new truck gets fed through that funnel, then spits out a number of what it suggested we should spend, and that if we don't have a bit more of a focus as a committee and a council on that table and what those numbers are, you know, the PCI for the major or minor, does it go up or down, the 80-20 split? My recommendation also suggests that possibly looking at the introduction of a minimum PCI, that one of the problems when you have a policy that calls for an average, that when you've got a brand new road in one part of the network, and then you've got a road that might be a PCI 1 or 2 somewhere else in the network, when it's an average across the network, the average goes up because of the new roads added in, that, you know, should we possibly have a minimum that no road falls underneath a certain standard, to avoid some of the issues I think that we've experienced across all divisions in the city, where just that one rural road or that one road just gets left and keeps getting pushed out of the program and ends up as a negative PCI in some circumstances. So, Chair, 3,200 kilometres of road network. Just for a bit of context for committee, that's Cape York to the bottom of Tasmania in a straight line. In a straight line, Cape York to bottom of Tasmania. Like, it is a huge road network. Asset management of that network is critical. In 2020, funding for our road rehab was 20 million. It simply was not enough, and it was leading to terrible asset management and a hell of a lot of complaints from our ratepayers of why the road's in this condition. In April 2021, Council endorsed the new pavement management plan, which introduced the current levels of service. So it introduced the 8.5 average for major, the 7.5 for minor, the 80-20 split. That was a huge leap forward in our asset management and a huge leap forward in the policy that dictates how much money we were spending. That new policy saw us go from 20 million a year to, in this financial year, we're up at 70 million and projected to keep growing. Like a massive jump over a few years. The proposed change today is with an idea of using all that new data and evidence that's going to come from the IPAVE truck, the new pavement management model that Nick spoke to in his presentation, to bring forward some scenarios to us that before we endorse the final prioritisation criteria, that we get a chance to see some scenarios and see what happens if we pull a lever up or down in one, if we introduced a minimum, that it can run some scenarios. We get to see that, see what it does to the dollar figures, see what it does to the amount of kilometres of road to be resurfaced each year. And then once we've seen that, we then endorse the final prioritisation criteria. So that's the only real difference, is that officers don't get that final endorsement of the criteria today. We get to see scenario modelling first. We get to see the impact of levers being pulled, and then we make that final decision. The final point I wanted to make, Mr. Chair, this is in an asset management context, and that's how the officers focus it on. I'm focusing on what is a reasonable ratepayer in the city, to Gates' point, no matter where they live. So the fact they might live in the back of Cedar Creek on a rural road, they're still ratepayers. They have a desired expectation of what their road should look like. And I guess I'm trying to meet that in the middle of how do I take what a reasonable ratepayer expects and push it into a policy that leads to the right amount of dollars being spent for asset management each year. Would request committee endorse this, and that we look forward to some really interesting committee reports in January, February, March as we progress this forward, which keeps us on the same timeline that Nick's linear graph already had us on.
Councillor Young,
Thanks, Chairman. I'll indicate I'm supportive of the changed motion, but just want to check that the data will be available by that time for the entire city. So we're dealing with a comprehensive review, not just bits. Thanks.
Councillor Tozer.
My question is actually about the major and minor roads. Can the modelling that we've asked for have a look at, instead of an 80-20 ratio, a 70-30 ratio? And I think that kind of plays into what Councillor Gates was trying to say, that maybe our weightings aren't quite right, and maybe some of those minor roads. And the other part of the question I have is, so firstly, can that be done? Secondly, have we ever looked at it like a 3-category thing where, so in my division, I have lots of kind of major roads, which are state roads, and then I have bigger roads, but then I have a lot of cul-de-sacs. And there's often a bit of criticism from the community when we're resurfacing a cul-de-sac instead of some other connector road that might be in maybe similar condition, but there's a question in the community about whether resurfacing that cul-de-sac is actually worth it compared to another road that might be more heavily trafficked. So 2 questions. Can we move from 80-20 to 7-30, and can we do some modelling on that? Part 2 question is there a situation where we could have a 3rd category where we have kind of major roads, minor roads, and then some other very negligible category that is only affecting smaller, low trafficked options?
Through the chair, the answer is yes and yes.
Right. Okay. Well, that was easy. Thank you.
Councillor Gates, did you have a question? No?
Through the chair, I guess one of the overarching drivers that with the road network is least whole of life costs to a defined service standard. So in essence, to some of those graphical representations of PCI dropping, and then there's obviously an investment to bring it back up. There is actually a sustainability index aspect to this as well. So road assets, one asset class. Obviously, we need to ensure that our investment across all asset classes is sustainable and of a required level of service. But in essence, there will be an optimal point of investment for a defined service standard. So 8.5, anything above 8 is very high. There will be very few local governments with PCIs in the 8s for their major networks, so that's a great starting point if we're close to that already. And I think we might give you some context we'll try and get some benchmarking data for other PCIs from other authorities as well, just to give you some.
I mean, you only have to go to D-Bar and drive, the council roads over to, over the New South Wales border to see the difference in levels of service between, different local governments. And sorry, say again?
I did it recently and I can attest to that.
Yeah, like you can see those standards of service. And I think the challenge that people feed back to me is that, we probably should be taking a closer look at some of this, because 8.5 might be a bit high based on the aspirations we have to deliver the program. So assuming this, I'm not really asking a question anymore. I'm kind of speaking in favour. Sorry.
Okay. I'm going to ask anyone want to talk against the motion. I'll close and I'll hand it back to. Do you want to close?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to make one quick comment. While benchmarking against other local governments is important, I've got to admit I'm more interested in what our ratepayers think their road network should be in. So the fact that other local governments may underspend on their road network or may not be mature in asset management as us is fine. I'm interested in getting what our ratepayers expect their road condition to be to reflect in the policy. So that's very much where I'm coming from, and I think officers understand my views around that. And it's the scenario modelling is about having a look at all those opportunities. So, is it 70-30, the idea of a minimum? Because when you've got an average, that's always going to mean there's outliers. And when I've seen roads with a negative PCI, that's really difficult to explain to a community member. But we've got a sustainable pavement management plan that says that they're going to a major road network's going to be 8.5, and they send me photos of what their road at the front of the house looks like. So meeting in between, policy to reflect what reasonable ratepayers expect their road network to be in, but very conscious of what Mr. Kaler said, that there will be a point where spending too much affects other networks, and we've got to find that right point. So really look forward to modelling, really look forward to seeing what that big trucks data comes out with, and then hopefully us coming to a quick decision on that prioritisation criteria, so we can roll forward with the other important stuff to come out of this, which is around contractor improvements, additional resources to assist Andrew Munt's team, all that kind of stuff as well.
Thank you. And I mean, from the last one, 6.3, and now we're talking, 6.5, and now this, it's important about all our road networks and where that balance is. I mean, we've heard a conversation of where the number balance should be, where the investment is, where our local roads and our major roads, the prioritisation is really important. I think early next year, the team hopefully will come back to us to ensure that we're making sure that all our roads, whether we're on the coastal strip, whether out in the rural country, is being looked after for all ratepayers. So I'm going to put it to you. All in favour? Carry. We're going to go to 7.1, Infrastructure Gold Coast Capital Update. Now, this is a closed session presentation. Do we have a report on this, Michael? Yeah, so we'll go into close. If I can see a mover, that the report considered closed session pursuant to section 254J3 of the Local Government Regulation 2012. The reason that the matter involves local government budget, a negotiation in relation to commercial matter involving the local government for which a public discussion would likely prejudice the interests of local government, and a matter the local government is required to keep confidential under law or formal agreement with the Commonwealth or a state. Do I have a mover? Councillor Gates, seconder. Do I hear Councillor Hamill? All in favour? Carry, streaming off. So we have now just been discussing infrastructure Gold Coast capital update, 7.1. We've got the motion on the screen. Councillor Young was the mover. It's been seconded by Councillor Tozer. Do we have anyone want to talk for?
Yeah, I'll speak briefly to it, Chairman. Obviously, it's a confidential matter, so it'll have to be around the edges, but we do have a massive capital works program anticipated next year and for the following decade. And what's occurred now is a very scientific analysis of the deliverability of that program into the next 12 months and an alignment with our new contracting plan, which is seeking to gain efficiencies and deliver a lot of this infrastructure in a very certain manner, giving council a reliable opportunity to review contract performance and that sort of stuff. So it's a complicated matter. This proposal is for the budget to be adjusted, and realistically that means a reduction in deliverability in this current financial year, but I think it's a good body of work that's been done and it gives us some confidence moving ahead. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Anyone speak against? We'll put the motion to you. All in favour? Carry. Thank you. Do we have any general business? No general business, so close 2:57. Thank you. What was that?